Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last panel of this two-day conference. I hope everyone has been informed and inspired in different ways by this really fascinating field of research of Dunhuang studies. I certainly have, and it's been a journey through all the very, very fascinating, very detailed aspects of Dunhuang studies. And this last panel is very interesting because it relates to everything that we've been hearing, but finding different ways of combining it with today, our society today, finding different creative outlets for this field of study. And today we've got four fascinating speakers who will introduce this particular field of study. So our first speaker of this panel is Professor Xiaoze Xie, who is a professor of art at Stanford University. And for anyone who's seen the show, and for those people who haven't seen the show, the Dunhuang show, Professor Xie has an artwork inside the exhibition, so that warrants a more careful look. So Professor Xie will be sharing his work on researching, reconstructing, and reimagining the Dunhuang Library Cave. Welcome, Professor Xie.
Thank you, Colin, for your kind introduction. I would also like to give my thanks to the British Library, the wonderful team of Louisa, Melody, Kitty, Josh, and many of their kind colleagues. It's indeed my great pleasure to be here to share with you my project that I started in about 7 years ago. So when I received an invitation from the Dunhuang Foundation in the US in early 2017 to be the first artist in their new Artist in Residency program, I was so thrilled and deeply humbled. Dunhuang has been a place of artistic pilgrimage for generations of artists since the beginning of the 20th century. Many artists, such as Zhang Daqian, Chang Shuhong, have left an impressive legacy at Dunhuang. How would I find a different path and unfold different types of work? And Dunhuang has such an iconic historical and cultural status and rich artistic heritage, which could be a bit formidable. How can I balance my sincere respect with creative freedom? So in the summer, I stayed for nearly a month at the Dunhuang Academy's guest house, Mogao Sanzhuang. Every morning, I walked about 10 minutes north to the academy. I spent my first few days reading and developing ideas at the library, and then began working in the temporary studio provided by the academy. At night, this is a picture taken from the window of my guest room. I could look out into the faint light, illuminating the rows of caves in the northern section where ancient monks had practiced and lived. It was a sight to remember for a lifetime. It was a simple, peaceful, and fulfilling life experience to be cherished. So I had been reading and researching, thinking in the months leading up to my summer residency at the academy. There are so many ideas floating in my head, but somehow they always came back to Cave 17, the library cave. So during my residency, I started a research-based project called Ember of History, which I continue to work on until this day. I guess I do not have to repeat the story of the accidental discovery of the library cave in 1900, and in the following years, the dispersal of over 50,000 cultural relics it had once stored. This is the entrance to the cave. So this 1908 photograph of the French sinologist Paul Pelliot, huddled in a dimly lit cave reading in front of a mountain of scrolls, lingered in my mind like a ghost. It is such a dense, gloomy, and haunting, but also beautiful image. And to me, this scene from over 100 years ago seemed as if it was only yesterday. On September the 5th, I was fortunate to be granted a rare permission to enter the cave. I feel like I was an amateur archaeologist or historian, and I was wondering how can I blend analysis and scholarship with poetic imagination in my creative work. And this became the starting point for me. Thanks to the 3D data provided by the Academy, I eventually came up with the idea of transforming the internal space of the cave, which is the void, into a solid volume. And this is the first model I made using 3D printing. Then I perceived this volume to be an ember that preserves some genes of Chinese culture. So my project, Ember of History, centers on the troubled history and the encyclopaedic content of the library cave. I started this long scroll in ink and brush. It brings together notes, diagrams, calligraphy, architecture, concept drawings for sculptures, as well as quoted images from relics unearthed from the cave. It truthfully documents a process of studying contemplation, imagination, and conceptualization. It took the form of a hand scroll, which is the format of Dunhuang manuscripts. In the meanwhile, I was also making a lot of small ink sketches, which quickly recorded my source materials and initial responses and ideas and thoughts that came to me. First of all, I set up a conceptual framework. I treated the library cave, which had been sealed for nearly 9 centuries, as ember of history, strata of memories, and time capsule. And based on the architectural diagrams, I transformed the vacant internal space into a physical entity to explore the relationship between fullness and a void, aggregation and absence. I use it as a recurring basic unit, kind of a stage or a theater in which I project my various imaginations, unfold a series of themes in different sections. So the first one, according to the textual descriptions in R.L. Stein's Silendia, and a few photographs taken by Stein and Paleo, I render the section called Hao Fan Jing Zhi, vast volume of sutras with traditional linear drawing and ink wash to restore the original of the cave before relics were removed. I speculated how the scrolls might have been piled up against the end wall first, the end wall facing the entrance in layers, and then along the walls on both sides, and eventually fill up most of the space. This is the section, Tangible Materials, based on Stein's categorization and scale estimation of materials found in the cave. I imagine that paper, silk, linen all melt down and settle like horizontal layers of geological strata, and then we have some wooden dowels floating inside. This section, Land of Words, adopts a deconstructive technique. I selected keywords that recur in canonical Buddhist sutras and freeing them from the constraints of the surface material and allowing them to float and disperse freely. And this became an opportunity for me to practice calligraphy, which I enjoy greatly. And I had to tilt and distort some of them in perspective when they float in space. Words related to worldly desires and sufferings sink and gather at the bottom, while words pointing to enlightenment, liberation, salvation, and voidness ascend to the top, visually conveying the essential meanings of Buddhism. The writing of this text is faithful to the calligraphic style of the original scrolls, ranging from Northern Dynasty script, which preserved the aesthetics of the clerical script, Li Su, to the more square Sui and Tang Dynasty regular script, Sui Tang Xiao Kai, partially reflecting the evolution of Chinese calligraphy. I subsequently studied the painting, Tang Dynasty painting, 3 realms and 9 levels diagram, and I read textual expositions of Abhida Makosa Basia. on the Buddhist views of the cosmos, 俱舍论. So this is the painting, which is, if I remember correctly, about 2 meters high. So I made this illustration to help myself understand the structure and the layers of the Buddhist cosmology. From the bottom up, you see void, the wheel of wind, of water, of gold, and then hell, 9 mountains and 8 oceans, Mount Sumeru, with the sun and the moon, and the 28 levels of heavenly realms, leading toward, upwards, toward emancipation and salvation from the earthly world. Then I started to conceive a 3D model placed within the library cave to resonate with the phrase, 一窟之中宛然三界, which means being in a Buddhist cave is like being in the 3 realms of the world. In other words, a Buddhist cave offers a complete model of the world. And this is the first version with a more figurative style, incorporating elements of traditional Chinese painting. You can see these banners fluttering above come from this painting of Bodhisattva as guides of souls in the British Museum collection. The painting is also influential in my later color studies. I further simplify it into a 3-dimensional abstract composition of geometric shapes in which a series of spheres representing the 28 heavenly levels intersect the inner walls of the cave, forming layers of arcs that looks like a magnetic field with a complex and rigorous structure. It's kind of, cut into an onion. These are snapshots taken on September the 10th, the last day of my residency. So after the first 4 sections, the ink scroll unfolds spatial imaginations, and some of them are turned into ideas and blueprints for sculptures and installations now being realized. In the summer of 2019, I traveled to Shenzhen and found a resin factory, began experimenting with resin sculptures. So first of all, I made a scaled-down model using 3D printing and manually adjust the form to be more naturalistic, then make a plastic mold based on the model. Characters from Buddhist sutras were selected and cut out from sheets of film and then inserted and cast inside the amber-colored resin, which was poured into the mold in layers, creating this effect of characters floating. This is a work from 2023. It was shown last year here in London at Pi Artworks. In the next few years, I carried out tests on various color combinations, mixing mineral pigments and resin coloring agents that would transform the rich color combinations of some Tang Dynasty paintings, turn them into abstract compositions. And you can call this stretcher of art history, perhaps. So then, eventually, these sculptures began to take shape as a series. This is a version of high saturation colors. It's illuminated by a light hidden inside the pedestal. In combination of low saturation colors, which are very common as paintings aged over the years. This is the realization of the idea, tangible materials, 触摸材质. I used silk, linen, and paper pulp of varying hues and textures, and mixed them in resin, and poured this mixture in layers while interspersing wooden sticks to represent the wooden dowels of the scrolls. It's kind of like a fruit jelly with bits of peanuts. And this is how the sculptures look like when arranged into a mandala-like kind of configuration in my exhibition in Shenzhen that was just finished. So then I managed to visit Dunhuang again in the summer of 2018. At that time, I was deeply fascinated by the Dunhuang star chart and began to study its related materials, I was so excited to see it yesterday in the exhibition. So according to an article entitled The Dunhuang Chinese Sky, a comprehensive study of the oldest non-star atlas, the volume, this scroll, should date from the 7th century AD in the early Tang Dynasty. And its original author may have been the famous mathematician and astronomer Li Chunfeng. So the Dunhuang star chart consists of 13 flat star maps and corresponding textual annotations with text on the left and chart on the right. 12 of the star maps are compilation from monthly observations over 1 year, depicted in cylindrical projection with separate time angle zones, and each recording stars within the celestial region of about 30 degrees east-west distance, and then minus 40 degrees to plus 40 degrees equatorial latitude. And the 13th chart depicts the circumpolar of the North Pole region. The scroll records more than 1,300 stars, describing the 28 constellations with breathtaking completeness and accuracy. So this is an illustration I made, a sketch, after reading the article, again, helping myself to understand the system. So you can see this 13 maps are kind of like 12 slices of a watermelon plus the cap. So according to the order of the 12 months and the spatial relationship, I combined the 13 star maps into a circular form and then bent it into a hemisphere, kind of like a dome. So imagine if this is a glass dome etched or drawn with the star atlas. So if you look outward from inside the dome, the constellations look the way they do on the scroll. But if you look into the dome from outside, the maps are actually left and right reversed. During the second residency, I make many small sketches. My idea was to use the starry sky as a dome to cover the earth in accordance with 天圆地方, the claim that heaven is round and earth is flat or is square, and let clouds float in between. This is the Tang Dynasty Accounting for the Clouds and Gases, book volume 1, 占云气书一卷, which I will quote various cloud forms for my drawing. It wasn't until the spring of 2019 that I started the 3 sections on ancient astronomy and astrology in my Stanford studio. The celestial heaven is either contained within the library cave or covers it externally, and together they form a model of the world. In this version, it is contained inside and it covers the Tang Dynasty capital city of Chang'an. And you're looking from outside, right? So the star maps are left and right reversed. In this version, though, the dome circumvents the library cave, covering the 12 ancient states. 观乎天文以察时变 means observing astronomical phenomena to speculate the changes of the times. These ancient phrases indicate that astrology, cloud divination, and the interpretation of celestial phenomena were essential means by which the ancient Chinese predicted the future and judged good and bad omens. So I try to create a holistic model that fully embodies this sort of belief or knowledge system. These are the 3 sections at my Stanford studio. The last section finally brings us from historical kind of dreaming into today's reality under the shadow of nuclear war. At the same time, make a large-scale installation, Starry Sky, based on the 1908 photos that I just showed earlier. And I combined it, I expanded shifted the scene to include the architecture of the whole cave and combined it with the starry sky. It looked as if Paleo was opening up the vast sky of the medieval times from a dark, small, enclosed space in Dunhuang. And I think the surrounding area quite a bit if you compare. The right hand of Paul Paleo holding the scroll, that is my hand. I was modeling for it. It's acrylic painting on paper and punctuated by rows of found wooden dials and knobs that suggest the dispersal of the cultural relics. Okay, I'm going to go just very quickly through this section. My drawings inspired by mandalas. So this is the one in the French collection. And from the British Museum collection. So my thinking was that mandalas was first built in India as earthen altars. As an altar, it could be three-dimensional. It could have different levels. The mandala represent the Dharma, the microcosm of the universe, an image of the mind, and a symbol of spirituality. I used P4519 as a blueprint and refer to the form, structure, and proportion of the later three-dimensional mandala. So this is a wooden sculpture from Qin Dynasty, Pule Temple. Okay. There's no time, but I would still like you to see this. Let's connect the 15 sections and look at the scroll drawing as a whole. Now looking back, my residency at Dunhuang and the ongoing experiments that followed have profoundly impacted my practice. The Library Cave project extends my attempts to integrate traditional art with contemporary ideas and expands my attempts in recent years to introduce research and scholarship into artistic practice. So this process of the Library Cave project may be my search for cultural roots, but it's not the so-called return to tradition, but instead an experiment to dive into tradition from a new perspective in search of innovation. And here I'd like to give my thanks to, well, there's a long list of people, but here in the audience, Professor Michelle Wang and Dr. Lu Yuping, and many friends who have helped me in this elaborate project. It's almost there. Okay, there are 15 sections. And at last, as we can fast forward, this is my newest work, Models of the Universe. It's a video installation using 3D projection mapping. So basically, I built a sculptural form of the Library Cave 1-to-1, as in Shanghai, and then project this video onto it and make it look like that's happening inside the cave. These are a sort of culmination of my project so far. I would fast forward, but I cannot do it from here. It's okay? Okay, 5. Sit back and relax. So this is slowly building up from, void to the wheel of wind, wheel of water, and wheel of gold, and hell. Now it's Josanba, Mount Sumeru, 28 heavenly levels. I have some banners that I quoted from the paintings. Turning into abstraction. So this has to do with the idea of 三千大千世界, a basic world model that multiples and becomes infinity. This piece is not from the Library Cave. It's a Yuan Dynasty tapestry at the Met collection in New York. But it's related to the mandalas. So the use of colors is inspired by many Buddhist paintings. Thank you so much.